It's 2019, the year that an egg broke a world record for the most likes on Instagram. Lil Nas X released his now platinum song Old Town Road, and coincidentally, the year that a little western indie game released. We're here to discuss that little indie game and see what about it made it great, and what about it currently is doing pretty poorly. So yep, buckle in, let's go. The game originally was paid access for 50 Robux and had a small community of players. The Wild West, while small, boasted some pretty significant achievements for the Roblox platform, one of which was its very solid PvP aspect, which still keeps some players very devoted to honing their skills to this day. When the 2019 Easter egg hunt rolled around in April, the Wild West made its first free-to-play appearance on the platform. This brought in an influx of new players to find the egg, but a significant amount of them stuck around. The paid access players from before this time were promised exclusive rewards for their early backing of the project. The game continued to have small and seasonal holiday updates until September of 2022, when there was a pivotal moment that would influence the game's community heavily: the faction update. The faction update added a new boat robbery, some forts around the map, and a new faction system that allowed players to create in-game groups. Now, there were already unofficial factions made for the game that hosted trainings and went to war with each other, but this update introduced a way to make PvP intrinsically more valuable and made players feel like a part of a team. These factions were capable of taking over forts, and there was even a ranking system to help faction leaders organize and structure their faction members. The PvP and role-playing communities flourished from this update, as lots of factions popped up either for role-playing or to compete for the title of the best faction through intense and very sweaty PvP. This update also sparked wider PvP-centered communities, which gained the overarching label of the faction community. And while most players involved with these communities probably aren't awful individuals, they were generally less kid-friendly communities that consisted of older players that were mostly into the game for its PvP gameplay, apart from the little Wild West kiddos that trickled over. This marks the point of the story where things get a little dicey. There were already in-game tactics or phrases such as the classic mule spamming or easy that were deemed toxic, but having a full community devoted to sweaty PvP with often little rules created some truly toxic places. So much so that there began to be a stigma surrounding factions and the community that had formed around them. It is important to note that most of the individuals involved with these communities were normal people, but some truly abominable people were spawned in these environments, and they certainly were not safe for kids to access around all the based individuals. It was apparent that moderation was going to keep an eye on communities like this, and a lot of moderation was directed at the faction community. This is where things could have been clearer. Moderation for a while wasn't extended to things outside the game or its community Discord. But after a while, a lot of people began to get banned for things outside of the community's bubble. That's an argument for some other type of video, whether you agree with that or not, but this furthered the stigma between the game and the Discord moderation and the faction community. Also through these relatively uncensored communities that hackers would post leaks and show off their latest devious licks. I'm not here to give any awful people any recognition, but you can assume exploiters and hackers did affect the game to a certain degree. Speaking of hackers, the Wild West was ahead of its time when it came to anti-cheats on Roblox. Most games had no way to protect against hackers and exploiters due to Roblox, a kids gaming platform, having no types of anti-cheats available for developers. They were all on their own to create their own anti-cheats. However, the Wild West had Sky, a developer who was responsible for most of the game's security aspects. Sky was heavily involved with the creation of the in-game anti-cheat, and even worked with individuals to test the game's security to ensure exploiting in the game was actually difficult to pull off. And the anti-cheat was very effective, especially with the creation of software dedicated to exploiting in the game. However, there was always people that were going to squeeze through the cracks with exploits, and until Roblox themselves addresses the issues, no game is 100% safe. Now, this anti-cheat sparked some more controversies, with people claiming that it was false flagging them when they were accused of cheating. Now, it's almost guaranteed that the system wasn't perfect, and I'm sure it's not, but generally its results were adhered to for in-game moderation. But I'd like to, in this video, on behalf of the community, formally thank Sky, wherever she is, for keeping this game relatively exploit-free and safe. You really did a lot, and it means a lot to us. As of now, Sky no longer works at Starburst Studios and has left the Wild West community. I just thought we should note that. From this point, the game received very few updates except for the seasonal Christmas ones, which were sick. Starburst Studios had been hyping up updates to come, aka the building update. This update would add a whole new customizable housing feature to the game where players could buy properties and build whatever modular masterpiece they wanted. Players from now on were always waiting to see when this update would drop, and it has turned into sort of a meme in the community. When update was now increasingly common to read within the Discord. Finally, the game did receive an update, an auction house. This update added an auction house within the lonely Fort of Howling Peak where players could bid on rare weapons and instruments, which were sold incrementally with serial numbers being attached to each item to give a sense of rarity for collectors. This update, in my opinion, was a huge oversight. Not only were these weapons extremely expensive, unlike anything the game had ever seen before this time, but the prices were player-driven due to the auction-type bidding system. All of a sudden, a 12K gun wasn't the most expensive item. It was a laser rifle that sold for over $1 million in-game dollars. This is where the game became a money-printing simulator. Players were expected to come up with just insane amounts of money to afford these auction items, and would frequently farm for hours just to get a chance of bidding against some other unhinged individuals with ridiculous amounts of Western V-Bucks. One thing I will never understand is why the game or the game's creators decided to desecrate its seemingly reliable Wild West-centered time period, which only a few Easter eggs and locations within the map would be breaking that trend. They outright added a Spitfire, a laser rifle capable of doming anyone at any range, and they assigned it to such a high value within the community that it would be impossible to remove due to the effort required to obtain one. It's important to note that out of the 9 auction weapons, a few of them were just better versions of other guns. Guns like the Lancaster pistol, Schwarzenlu's prototype pistol, and the Patterson revolver were now just required to compete within a PvP scene, and the Spitfire itself just redefined PvP interactions in general. It was a glaring issue that new players would be absolutely destroyed by guns that were seemingly inaccessible to normal casual players. It was clear that it would take an alarmingly low touching of grass to achieve these now coveted meta weapons, which is still an issue to this day. In my opinion, again bringing up my opinion, if the base prices for these guns weren't $50,000 or more, these weapons could be more affordable. Now the other oversight to this update was that there was a drop mechanic put in place. Now this created an unofficial trading system. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but now players could drop really rare items for anybody to pick up, and it created sort of a trust trading / scamming epidemic. Players were constantly messaging people saying they got scammed and asking for help, and there wasn't a whole lot anybody could do because there was just so many cases of scamming. And so naturally people just said, oh, you're on your own for that kind of thing, which I think was terrible because this game has a community of children, and I don't think enough thought was put into this update and this dropping mechanic without adding a real trading system. So kids just lost tons of items, and I don't know, it doesn't sit right with me. Now there was an actual trading system put in place weeks or months later, I can't remember, but it had already been too late, the damage was done, and it just wasn't a good situation at all. It definitely didn't help the player count either. Many people have attributed the auction house update as one made to stall the player base for long periods of time to avoid updates. I don't think this was intentional by the developers, but it certainly was what sustained most players' desire to play the game. They wanted a gun that was so hyped up that when they got them, sure, they were satisfied, but there wasn't more substance to the game other than money-making aspects, unless you were heavily into PvP or role-playing. Anyways, from now on, the game received hardly any updates once again, and it was apparent that something was slowing the development of the game more than usual. Besides for a banger holiday event update in 2021, there wasn't much going on. I was able to score an interview with Tyrant77 a while ago, one of, if not the founder of the game besides Kazuhira. In this interview I asked some questions about his personal life and tried to steer away from bothering him about the game, as I'm sure he gets that a lot. But one thing was apparent, the team was facing setbacks from COVID, as well as other things, and it seemed as though motivation, especially his, was lacking. Later actions would prove this. Things were posted about Tyrant being almost and if not completely MIA for development. This was later unofficially addressed in the most recent Wild West update, where there was a wrecked pirate ship in the middle of the game's deserted area. Aboard the shipwreck were notes written from Kazuhira's perspective as a first mate. Multiple remarks to a captain being missing during a storm are made within the notes, subtly inferring that Tyrant, their lead developer, was just not present. I made a video discussing the specifics of these notes that you can check out. I'll put a link at the top of the video right about now. An important thing to remember is that there are developers that still work hard on the game, but if Tyrant, the leader of the Starboard Studios Roblox Group that owns the game, isn't present, there's a big problem. You see, if a group owns the Roblox game and Tyrant owns the group funds, aka payment, might be controlled to a certain extent by him, which if people aren't being compensated could result in less incentive to work. Kazuhira, the co-founder of the game I believe, was pretty much all by himself responsible for making sure the game received a Halloween update in 2022, which Kaz, if you're watching this, great job man, really appreciate it. And recently there was an announcement that there wouldn't be a Christmas update in 2023, and lo and behold, there wasn't. This really showed that right now we are in the biggest content drought of all. There was never any issue creating fun, smaller event updates, even when larger content was slim. The fact that they couldn't reuse some assets and create a few like they've done in the past just shows how slow development has become. It's possible that all the manpower is still going into things like progression, an update that promises to reshape the way the game is played, and hopefully bring a stop to some of the boring grind with some cool rewards and leveling systems, and also redirect attention away from just playing to earn money. That was a pretty big run-on sentence, I'm sorry. I believe that update, progression that is, will be just what the game needs rather than some new housing feature, although that does sound great too. Now the game isn't downright unplayable or dead like a lot of people say it is. However, the replayability is solely for PvP purposes and there isn't a whole lot to do besides make money, buy items, and repeat. But the game is a lot of fun for new players, who will have a great time, I'm really sure of that. This is why I use the word stagnance instead of just saying the game is dead. I hope the developers of Starboard Studios can bring themselves together to get this game to a better state. I hope this video has helped get you up to speed with the Wild West, or just entertained you. I tried to make this video as unbiased as possible and referred to multiple people from different parts of the community for different takes. This video does pull a lot from my own personal opinion, so feel free to disagree with me or bring up other things that may have contributed to the game's stagnant state down below in the comments. I'd love to hear it. You can also join my community Discord via the link in the description, and thank you all for watching. Here's to hopefully an eventful 2023 for the Wild West. See ya.